Let's get started. My name is Joyce Raimondo. I'm the education coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center in East Hampton. And we're a national landmark. We're located about 100 miles east of New York City. And I'm zooming in remotely today from my studio, which is right down the street because the house and the barn is closed today. This is a tremendous honor for me personally to host this program. This is a tribute to the legendary photographer, Tony Vaccaro. Tony's 100th birthday is December 20th. So we are wishing Tony the happiest, most beautiful birthday. And we do have his son, Frank Vaccaro, here, who will speak from his own experience as well as on his father's behalf. So let's say hello to Frank, and then we'll go, I'll show you some images and we'll hear from everybody. So Frank, do you want to just say a few words to start?
Well, Tony is 99 and he turns 100 in 10 days. But, and you know, he's never been sick. He's never had a major health issue, but he collapsed on November 14th and was taken to the VA Harbor Health Hospital on 23rd Street in New York City. And he's came home for a weekend, last weekend, but it didn't stick. And so he was readmitted to the hospital and we expect him home on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see how it goes. He had just had a stomach ulcer, but he never complained about his stomach. It was affecting his eating and then his strength. He never all summer complained about his stomach. So they found it, they fixed it, but now it seems like he has to learn how to eat again. So it's hard, but he can do it. He's so tough.
Yeah. Well, we so appreciate you being here today. I know this must be a really trying time for you and your family. And we are here to celebrate the work and life of your dad. So I hope this lifts up your spirits. So we will start with a video that was created by the Monroe Gallery. And this will give a little overview of Tony Vaccaro's work, which is it's so interesting to me how Tony was photographing these, World War II as a soldier on the front line. And then he later photographed on behalf of Look magazine, celebrities and some of the most beautiful and talented people in the entire world. It's so uplifting. It's so beautiful. And so let's take a look at that in this short video.
Nations cannot unite. Only people can unite.
Michelantonio Celestino Onofrio Vaccaro, Tony, was born in Pennsylvania in 1922. Orphaned by the age of 4, Tony was moved to Bonefro, Italy, to be raised by a cruel and abusive uncle, who nevertheless introduced him to photography. When World War II broke out, the American ambassador in Rome ordered Tony to return to the United States. Reunited with his sisters, Tony finished high school in New Rochelle, New York. Bertram Lewis, Tony's high school teacher, encouraged him with an apprenticeship in photography. Lewis quite rightly declared Tony was born to be a photographer.
In 1944, at the age of 21, Tony was drafted into World War II, and he landed on Omaha Beach 6 days after the first invasion. Tony had applied to be a Signal Corps photographer, but was declared too young. Determined to document his experience, Tony brought along a small camera. For the next 272 days, through France, Belgium, and on to Germany, Tony photographed his personal witness to the brutality of war. His perspective was not that of a war photographer or a conflict photographer. It was a true documentation of frontline death, survival, snow and bitter cold, brief moments of joy, and emotional sensation. At the war's end, Tony confronted the reality that he had little to return to in the United States. He began photographing the reconstruction of Europe for Stars and Stripes magazine, working through his nightmares of war. He found humanity in the faces of the people he photographed as they began to rebuild their communities and their lives. He found empathy and hope. He was healing.
Tony's photographic transition from war and its aftermath was a deliberate one, an antidote, if you will, to man's inhumanity to man. Tony focused his lens on those who gave the world something of value: artists, architects, composers, politicians, and especially beautiful women.
Tony's vast archive is a step-by-step illustration of his will to live and to advance the power of beauty in this life.
Patience. You have to wait for the right moment. This is it. This is not it, not it, not it, not it, and then something happens and you click at the same time. You coordinate what you see with what you do. To do this at the right time, Maria, look at me. To do this with what's here, that's the trick. When you do it. And that's why very often I was the best photographer, because I waited for the right moment.
Video is remarkable. Do you have any thoughts on the video, Frank? Or
Never saw it. I never saw it before. It's very entertaining.
Oh, you never saw it before. Wow.
Yeah, I think Maria has it. My wife really runs the studio here.
Oh, okay, good. Well, now what I would like, and we're going to come back to, looking at some of his images more closely. The person did mention in the video how Tony turned to photographing people who had, gave tremendous contributions to humanity through the arts. And of course, one of those best known people is Jackson Pollock. And I understand Tony was on a look assignment and he came to photograph Pollock and Krasner and many of the other artists on the East End of Long Island. And Helen Harrison spoke a little bit about this in the Barn studio with me the other day because she couldn't be here today. Helen is our director. So I'm going to share that tour of the Barn studio and Tony's photographs right now.
Let's go on into the main part of the studio. And you can see all around the walls here, we have photographs of Jackson and Lee from different times of their lives, beginning when they were still in the city, and then coming out here, moving to this area, setting up their studios here, and turning this barn, which was a storage barn for fishing equipment, into an art studio, which first Jackson used and then Lee. Now, when these photographs were put together, the exhibition was installed by my predecessor, the founding director, Meg Perlman. Doing her research, she contacted the photographers who had taken the pictures. and all of them were still alive, and they were all extremely cooperative. The only one who is still alive and who photographed both Jackson and Lee is Tony Vaccaro, the birthday boy.
Happy birthday, Mr. Vaccaro.
So what he gave us was a set of pictures showing the barn right after it was renovated. Now, these white walls were not here originally. This is covered up a wooden barn structure, just a very rough wooden building. And in 1953, Jackson had it renovated. So you can see in Tony's pictures, this is the very earliest view of the white walls. You can see them, whoops, sorry. You can see them here, just the white wall. The floor was covered with masonite. And so this is a document of what the studio looked like in August of 1953.
Okay, Helen, let's pause for a moment just to take a look at the photos here. So who's pictured in this top photo?
So you see, this is Sam Duboff, who is a neighbor, Jackson, Lee, and their dog, Jip. So the neighbor came in and they were talking about the artwork, and Jackson had one of his paintings tacked up on the wall, and he was so comfortable with Tony around that he just started working on it again, adding a little color to it. So it's one of the very few pictures that shows him at work during that period. And here he is also sitting on the floor with his other dog, Ahab. And as you can see, he's relaxed, he's comfortable. This is a wonderful thing about Tony. He makes his subjects feel so comfortable and so at ease that he can really capture them in a very revealing and very sympathetic way. And I think that's one of his great gifts, is his rapport with the people he's photographing.
And how did it come about that Tony Vaccaro was able to photograph Pollock and Lee?
Well, he was sent here on assignment from Look magazine. And the editor of Look, Charlotte Willard, lived across the street. And she decided they wanted to do a feature article on Jackson, and Tony was the photographer. He was a freelancer, and he was hired by Look to do it. And the article never ran. But while he was here, he stayed here for a month with his friend, Costantino Nivola, the sculptor, who lived around the corner on Old Stone Highway. And while he was here, he went to social events, he went out to dinner, he went to different artist studios and homes. So he didn't just photograph Jackson and Lee, he photographed a lot of others as well.
And who were some of the other artists who he photographed?
He did de Kooning, Bill and Elaine de Kooning. He did Wilfred Zogbaum. He did Larry Rivers playing his saxophone and playing the piano at one of the local restaurants. So it was all very social and very relaxed. He went to Leo Castelli's house where Bill and Elaine were staying at the time, and he photographed a little cocktail party there with all the artists. So very much just, hanging out in the summer. But again, the article never ran, but we did know that Tony had taken these pictures. So in 2010, he was kind enough to let us do an exhibition of the pictures, just of Jackson and Lee, that he took that summer. And while we were putting it together, he's telling me about all these other pictures that he has, but he didn't have access to them at the time. Then when he moved his studio, all these pictures came out, and we said, well, let's do another show. So in 2017, we had a show of lots of these other artists who were working out here at that time.
And is there a specific website or anything that was left over from that exhibition where people could see these photos?
Well, Tony's studio has its own website. And remember, he didn't just photograph Jackson and Lee and other artists. He photographed statesmen, movie stars, business and industry tycoons, World War II. I mean, you name it. He has a portfolio that just goes on and on and on. So there's plenty of stuff to see online. And of course, we're hoping that we'll also hear from Tony himself and be able to wish him a happy birthday in person.
And I remember years ago when he was here at the opening, and how personable Tony was, and had so many stories to tell about his impressions of Pollock and Krasner.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice in these photos, it's so interesting how they're not posed. It's as if you don't even imagine the photographer is there.
Right.
It's as if you're there and you're just part of the scene with them.
Right.
They're very intimate in some ways.
But they're not snapshots. You know, they're very carefully composed. They're very carefully thought out because he has an artist's eye for the telling composition, for the right expression, for the moment of the right mood. So it's not, you know, this is not just your family snaps. These are definitely very professional photographs. And were intended, of course, for reproduction in the magazine, although for some reason the story was killed and it just never happened.
And who are some of the other photographers who are photographed Pollock, who are in this barn?
We have Hans Namath, who photographed both Jackson and Lee. You can see right over here is a photograph of Lee, taken in '62, and over here of Jackson, taken in 1950. Also famously, Arnold Newman took the color photographs for Life magazine. We've got Rudy Burkhart. He photographed Jackson and Lee up there on the top. And those are pretty
And then
much,
we have the Life magazine.
yeah, that's a
Arnold Newman
photo, but it's in color in the magazine. So there are several other people who are represented, and it's just a way of using the space to explain something about their lives and their work that since the barn is no longer used as a studio, of course, we want to show it in context. And then when Tony was here photographing, this floor was not exposed. This was covered up with masonite. And when we renovated it to make a museum, we took off the masonite covering and exposed all of the marks that Pollock left between 1946 and 1952.
It's remarkable. And there is his Pollock's original paint cans and tools and basters as well. And of course, we do hope you come in person and see these amazing photos and the documentation of Pollock and Krasner's work and life, as well as the magnificent barn studio, where you can just get such a feeling of what it was like for these two great artists to create here.
Absolutely. And when you look at the walls, you see all those marks on the walls. Those are from Lee, because after Jackson died in 1956, it became her studio, and she worked on the walls. She liked to use her energy vertically, and you can see that she had so much energy that sometimes it just splashed out over the edges of the canvas. The same way as Pollock, who's working horizontally, the energy spilled out onto the floor. So both of them are well represented with their evidence of their creative process.
Well, Helen Harrison, thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing what the Vaccaro family and Tony has to share about this amazing work and the stories behind them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So that was a little glimpse into the barn studio. Of course, we always hope you come to visit in person, but second best is a virtual tour. We will reopen in person in May. Okay, so go to pkhouse.org to sign up in advance for a tour. We get booked up really quickly. So Frank, any thoughts on I don't mean to put you on the spot. Anything you want to share, or anybody else want to share on anything that you heard, anything you want to fill in?
Well, it's always been an honor for Tony to have those photos at the house. And I remember when they made the movie on Jackson Pollock in 1999, was it?
It was in the 90s. Yeah, I forget the exact date.
Yeah, we lent them our negatives to get a good look at everything. Tony has, oh, I haven't counted, about 120 maybe photos that are, that they used, and shows every detail, every detail.
Yeah, and we don't have it on display, but I do recall there was one picture he took of Jackson Pollock smiling with his dog. Like, There are very few pictures of Pollock smiling, and he captured that moment, maybe that comfort with the pet. So I'm wondering, can you clarify something for us now? That story didn't run for Look magazine. We don't know exactly why. But then there's this story of the lost negatives that were rediscovered. Can you tell us about that?
I recall it was around 94 or 95. And my brother was helping Tony with his photography at that time. So I was not involved with that discovery. They discovered a box. And Tony's attitude was, yeah, I have these great photos of Jackson Pollock. And, you know, it was just like, well, how come you never told us? So we mentioned it to a few people, and the New York Times actually ran a story about it, and it led to some exhibitions, and we always included Jackson Pollock photos in our exhibitions after that. You got to understand, Tony has 750,000 negatives and chromes. So I've gone through them as much as I can, and I'm always finding multiple items that I've never seen before. If you look behind me, there's, I don't know, 400, 500 folders. Each folder is a job. And the folder on Spain has multiple jobs. This is organized. Yeah, prior to this studio, he had the photos in his little parlor, really a pile almost.
Yeah, I saw there's a YouTube video of Tony. I think it was you and Tony, or maybe your brother, setting up that studio or apartment, which is located in Queens, correct?
Yeah, well, he had a studio in Queens since 1982. Prior to that, he had his studio in the first floor of 6 West 77th Street. So what we set up for him in 2015 was a 5,000 square foot state-of-the-art studio near the Citibank building in Long Island City. So we ran that studio. He said, now that you've given me grandchildren, let's make it a family business. Prior to 2015, he did not let anybody touch his negatives, including me, really. So
Wow.
we kept that large studio open until 2019. You know, he was turned 97 that year, and he could no longer walk there, and he really stopped working in the darkroom. His last darkroom print was in January 2018. So we were paying a commercial rent for a darkroom and all the space, and we just brought it back to where he had it since 1982, which is this. This is a room in his apartment in Long Island City.
I think that's the one that I saw on YouTube. And now I wanted to ask you something. Wait, excuse me, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, what are your, okay, so now do you have a future project or a future vision for these photographs and Tony's legacy? And your dad, what does he have a vision for his legacy? Anything in particular?
Right now, the only thing we're concerned about is keeping him alive in comfort and with dignity. He can still walk. If you're walking next to him, he'll recognize everybody. He can answer a couple of questions, sharp as a tack, but he's 99, and in 10 days he'll be 100. So it's all about his comfort, his dignity, keeping him, you know, excited, interested. That's what it is. I'm not thinking about his legacy so much. I can tell you what I think his legacy is. He can tell you what it is.
What would you, and I don't mean to, when I say legacy, what I mean just is even right now the legacy, you know, even in the current moment. What do you feel? Would you mind sharing that, or is that too personal?
You know, it's tough. I was with him last night. I was with him this morning, and after this Zoom call, I'm going to be with him. And as soon as he's released back home, which should be Monday, then it's just going to be, we have nurses lined up. It'll be all of my time. And I'm the best person at getting him to eat. So I'm like an eating coach. When he says no to somebody else, they stop. But when he says no to me, I'm like, come on, Dad. But
That's pretty incredible, actually.
I must tell you, I'm not a fan of the New York Post. I never have been, for their politics. But today they ran a 2.5-page expose essay on Tony as he approaches 100, and it's pretty good. And if you search Tony Vaccaro New York Post, it'll pop up. I know they used 7 or 8 really nice pictures of his, and they talk about his legacy.
Mhm.
So that's where I would go with legacy. There, the New York Post is discussing his legacy as he turns 100. I think it's very well done.
Yeah, thank you so much. What I would like to do is I would like to actually show another video. I was watching quite a few YouTube videos to prepare, and honestly, I was so moved and so inspired. There's no words to describe it. The fact that your father was on the front lines actually as a soldier, and yet he managed to figure out, like, to take photos, and it's just extraordinary. But what I would like to share is him speaking about this in his own voice. And the images are, some of them, a little hard to see. So I just want to warn people, these are war photos. So if you're super sensitive, I just want to forewarn you. Tony says there's also a beauty in the photos. So let's just take a look, and hang on while I do the screen share. And this video was created by the American Battlefield Trust. It's 3 minutes.
My name is Michele Antonio Celestino Onofrio Vaccaro. I took pictures in World War II, and some of these pictures are now monumental. I was a private, and the Army needed good photographer. I processed in 4 helmets, the metal helmet, and I was doing this at the light of the moon at night. Crazy. When bullets were close to you, you don't use the camera. You use your rifle. And that's what I did. I never saw soldier. I saw human being. I saw red blood, human blood. When I saw that German burning, I knew that mankind was in a direction not favorable to his survival. The picture, the GI kissing the little girl, it's a human picture, not a war picture. My favorite war picture is men dead in the snow with a rifle. That's a frightening picture. Unfortunately, it can also be beautiful. I never wanted to be a fighter, but I always wanted to be a photographer. I have a lot of war pictures. I had to bring back to the future the insanity of war. When peace comes, that's what really was important. And that is when we want to see these gorgeous pictures that you are taking.
It's extraordinary, really.
If you search Tony Vaccaro photography or photographer on YouTube, I think it's like 10,000 videos. So if you have a day to kill or two, it just goes on, and we should really have them transcribed. Some of those stories I have not heard of. I have seen that that video. It's a museum in Pennsylvania, I believe, and Tony donated some of his war things, his helmet and dog tag and some other items.
Wow. I'm wondering, I'd like to invite you and other people on this meeting to share your thoughts on some of the photos. We could take a slower look rather than, they're moving in and out on the video. And I'd like to share my thoughts as well. So I'm going to show some of the photos just in a PowerPoint so we can just get a nice look. Okay. Now, some of these photos I saw on the Monroe Gallery website. So I invite everyone to visit the website, and we can put that in the chat later. So this is, I suppose, one of his most famous photographs. This is an iconic photograph of Tony Vaccaro's Kiss of Liberation. I'm just curious, any thoughts come to mind when you see an image like this? To anybody? Or Frank, did Tony ever speak about his experience in the war to you, or any of these images specifically?
Oh, the Kiss of Liberation all the time. HBO did a movie on Tony called Under Fire, and it's available on all platforms. And they go into deep dive into this photo. They even have Tony meets the two girls dancing in the back. He meets with them. That was around 2009, and it's very charming, very charming. And that movie is called Under Fire.
Thank you. And your father is so articulate about his process and his thoughts and his stories. It's remarkable. And sometimes when we look at the images, but then pair it up with your dad's way of storytelling, he has a very calming way of talking about these images. And so I found this to be very inspiring and uplifting, actually. I think for me with this image, we see the soldier, of course, and we realize the brutality of war, but this is so poignant. We see it's a loving image. And
yeah, that was Gene Costanza from Pittsburgh. And he was kissing a girl identified as Noelle, but the girl was a transient in the town of Saint Briac. This was taken during the celebration of the Nazis leaving the town of Saint Briac, France, August 14th, 1944. And Noelle was not heard from again. That doesn't mean she passed away. The town was unable to identify her.
Mm-hmm. Now this photo it's just remarkable what he said. It's disturbing yet beautiful. What do you think he meant by that? Or what would do you have any thoughts on that? Anyone here want to unmute? And how is this beautiful to you? There's no, if you're, it's just your own thoughts on it, or is it or not? Any thoughts on that? I think that, well, one aspect and when photographers are photographing war scenes or horrific acts, sometimes aesthetically the photo can be beautiful, like just the whiteness and the lines and that sort of thing. Formally, the photo can be beautiful. But I'm not exactly sure what your dad meant by that. But there is an interesting story behind this. Did he ever tell you the story about the Christmas trees?
Yes, yes, that's well known in the family.
You want to tell that story, Frank?
Yeah, I will say that when we found the negative here, when we set up the studio, there are quite a lot of footprints around this soldier. But we blocked out the footprints as Tony did in the darkroom to honor Tony's vision of this photo. Other than blocking out those footprints out of all of Tony's photography, I think there's only 2 other photos that we've edited, that we've cleaned up or edited or cropped differently than the way Tony originally took them. The vast majority of his photography we don't touch. He's lined it up perfectly and edited it perfectly on the fly. So this was January 11th, 1945 in east of Otré, Belgium. And Tony said when he saw the body, he immediately realized this was an opportunity to create a monument to the unknown soldier. And again, in Max Lukowitz's great film Under Fire, he goes a deep dive into this photo as well. Tony did look at the name of this photo after taking the shot. It was Henry Tannenbaum, a friend of his, of course. This was his division, the 83rd Division, 331st Infantry. Tony was not on this patrol that night, but came upon them early in the morning. And, you know, the picture was a picture of Henry Tannenbaum in wartime exhibitions for many years, beginning in 1994, really, the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And Sam Tannenbaum, who was 1 year old, Henry's son, saw the photo and sought out my father and said, you know, can you take me to the spot where my father died? And it was a transformative moment because for 50 years, for his entire life, Sam had no idea where his father had gone. And his mother had told him he was alive after the war, working for the FBI. So it was a lot of closure for Sam Tannenbaum. And when they went to Belgium and when they stood in the field and Tony said, well, I believe this is where he died, but now we have all these pine trees here. They asked the farmer where the location of the downed GIs were. And the farmer said, well, this is it, but I grow Christmas trees now on this spot. And Tannenbaum means Christmas tree in German. So
right, that's amazing.
The farmer picked quite a crop.
Wow, that's extraordinary. Thank you so much. Now this one is called Defeated Soldier. Any stories on this one?
Yeah, is that for me? I'm very happy to discuss these. I was expecting more Jackson Pollock photos, but these are great.
Well, I feel that this is so important. This is a tribute. This is a tribute to my father. So I feel that to appreciate the Pollock photos in full, we have to see the war photos as well.
I remember around 2005 or 6, we said, hey, we should put some of Tony's photos on the internet. And there was a platform, geez, I don't know if it's still around, Imgur, IMGUR. So we put it on Imgur, and we kind of forgot about it. And then we got an email saying that it was the fourth photo on Imgur to get 1 million views. So this was taken March 17th, 1947, across the street from the U.S. Embassy in Frankfurt. Now, this was a temporary location for the embassy. Tony, we know that photo was taken that day because Tony had to get his passport updated, and the date is stamped in his passport. He
Wow.
apparently was a prisoner in Texas or Oklahoma. Tony said he came with very new shoes and was crying on the spot of his family house. He had just returned from America. There were many German and Nazi prisoners that were incarcerated in Texas and Oklahoma after the war.
Now, your dad stayed on in Europe to photograph post-World War II Europe and the Reconstruction, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And you could see some of those photos on the Monroe Gallery website, as well as other locations on the internet. So now here we are for Jackson Pollock. So it's fascinating to me. I'm wondering if there's a theme for many artists after they experience great pain to then turn to subjects that are really uplifting. Or just even their own art becomes very more uplifting. I've noticed this with several artists. But anyway, here he comes to East Hampton and he's photographing Pollock, 1953. This is one of the photos represented by Monroe Gallery.
Yeah, this should be a postage stamp.
This is amazing. Did he ever speak to you about any stories about Jackson Pollock and Lee that you recall that stand out?
You guys have it covered. He told you the stories that he told us. And if there was anything you didn't know about Jackson, you've incorporated in your coverage of him. And I know they went to a flea market together and they bought an ashtray, 2 ashtrays of a pair, and Jackson took one and my dad has the other here now. If you want, I don't know if I can get it. I don't know if it might be in storage, packed away.
Okay, well, later, maybe if it's handy, we'll
Sure. Tony was a fly on the wall, really. You didn't know he was there. And that's how he got, as you said earlier, the subject to trust him.
Well, your father also, he's very personable. He reminds me a little bit of my father in terms of his personality and being Italian and, Greek. He seems from when I met him, when he had the exhibit at the house, as well as on the YouTube videos that I saw, he seems like a person who would be really easy to talk to.
I love the previous photo. Tony told me that Lee asked Jackson to evaluate one of her art paintings. So look at the body language here. I mean, Jackson's got his hand in his pocket to help him concentrate. He's pulled his cigarette out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
He's leaning forward aggressively. He's looking into it. And look at her. She's not looking at her painting. She's looking at Jackson.
You're right, Frank. It's almost like we can imagine what she's thinking, like she's waiting, like.
Yeah, she's breathless. She's leaning back. She's fidgeting with something, and her hand seems to be patting it. It's lovely. It's lovely. It shows that she really deeply cared about his opinion. As we didn't need this photo to know that, but it's just that's what it shows me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a good that helps us see a little more clearly what's going on here. And this one is fun. This is sort of playful. Your dad is reflected in the mirror here.
Oh yeah, that's the bedroom upstairs overlooking the bay.
Mm-hmm.
Tony was there October 15th, right in that spot.
Mhm. That vanity is no longer in the room. Of course, things changed as time went on.
The radiator's still there.
Yeah. And here, of course, this is Pollock, but it says his home, well, his studio. This is Portrait and a Dream. Did Tony ever mention anything about watching Pollock's process?
Well, I think if you look at the collection of Jackson Pollock's portraits, you'll find that there's not many. But when Tony visited Jackson in 53, I think he also saw him in 51 and 56. Tony said in 53, when he arrived, he said, "How come you never do a portrait?" And then he said he took a photo of him painting this. Now, I don't know if Tony asked the question after seeing the beginnings of this, or if Jackson tried to do a portrait after Tony asked the question, but I don't know of many Jackson Pollock portraits.
Yeah, this was unusual. And also the other side of the painting is abstract. So it shows like two different modes, right, of being an artist.
Yes.
And here they are walking into the barn studio.
This photo, they reenacted. Ed Harris played Jackson Pollock in that movie we mentioned, and they reenacted this little entering the studio, him holding the door for her with a cigarette.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that they used the photos for the movie, which is an amazing movie.
Yeah, they credited the studio, or no, I'm sorry, they credited Tony at the end.
And here's Jackson Pollock with his dog. And the other one, which isn't seen as much as the one which I absolutely love.
Yeah, this is nice.
This is fun. This is Willem de Kooning dancing with Hedda Stern at an East End night spot. Not exactly sure what the night spot is. And Hedda Stern, of course, is one of the foremost abstract expressionists, as well as Willem de Kooning. And there they are in the left over there. See them all the way to the left. Standing in the other couple. I love this photo. I love this. It's so nostalgic and it looks like they're having so much fun. And then, of course, we have portraits, as Helen Harrison mentioned, of many of the artists who lived on the East End. This is Willem de Kooning. This is Elaine and Willem de Kooning. And yes, and that is just, of course, a small sampling of Tony's celebrity portraits. I do encourage people to go onto the Monroe website to see all those outstanding, stunning portraits of Sophia Loren, these beautiful, beautiful women, and Pablo Picasso. It's extraordinary, really. So I'm wondering, let's see, would anyone else like to share? I know, Maria, you're a friend of Tony's. Would you like to share anything in this tribute? We're informal. Would you like to say a few words of?
Sure. I'm not in a place right now where I can turn on my video, but my husband and I were lucky enough to meet Tony, my husband first, just a few years ago, although we lived down the street from him for quite a long time. And he's really, it's been really a great blessing to know Tony. His worldview, the way he sees beauty and everything has really enriched our lives. And
Thank you so much.
it's also been great getting to know his lovely son and wife and the boys.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to say a few words? Monroe Gallery, anybody on there? Or anyone who just came onto the tribute who would like to share your thoughts about what you've seen and what you've heard? We'll first take Monroe Gallery here. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi. I'm Sid Monroe with Michelle. We are Monroe Gallery, and we're surrounded by Tony's work right now, which is just so uplifting and rich. And we'll be in New York next week for a temporary short exhibit. If anybody can make it, please come down to 21 Spring Street Tuesday through Sunday. We'll have about 25, 26 of Tony's pictures on exhibit there to celebrate the upcoming 100th birthday. But just echoing some of the thoughts that came through in the talk today, for us, we've been very fortunate over 30 plus years in this business to work with some of the greatest photographers of the 20th century, and a highlight has been knowing and exhibiting Tony's work. I think the theme that was touched on about his life and experience coming from just utter brutality, from his upbringing through his experience at war, and then focusing on the beauty and joy of life. There is no greater lesson for all of us to learn than what Tony has exemplified by the way he's lived his life. Not even to mention, the astounding collection of photography that he's created, which is just an incredible archive of the 20th century. So we love Tony. We've been in touch with Frank and Maria throughout his hospitalization. We can't wish him well enough. And it's just an honor to be surrounded by his work. So thank you for the time to honor him.
Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing the show in Manhattan.
Love to have you.
Very good.
We want as many people as possible to see Tony's work.
Thank you. What is your name?
I'm Sid Monroe, and my wife is Michelle Monroe. And we started our gallery in Manhattan over 30 years ago, and we're longtime residents of New York, but moved the gallery and our family to Santa Fe after September 11th. So it's a little bit of a homecoming for us to do this pop-up for Tony's exhibit.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming on. Now, as we're wrapping up our Zoom session, anyone closing thoughts? Frank, closing thoughts, message for your dad or other people who are on here. I'm putting you on the spot. I know, Frank. You're so patient. You're muted, Frank. Hold on.
Yeah, I'll be seeing him later. I'll have a personal message for him, but I'm reminded of something just irrelevant that my dad said. He saw a photo of Jackson Pollock by Martha Holmes, and he said he wishes he took it. And I have never heard him say that about many photos. But I hope you have you know who she is. I don't know much about Martha Holmes, but I know the image.
Yes, she photographed for Life magazine, and she photographed him actually in process doing his drip.
Yes, exactly.
Very kind of
He liked that.
Like it really looks like he has mastery over the technique, and yeah, so he's actually, it's iconic because it's the drip painting technique in and of itself.
I would say 95% of photographers out there, my father has not a lot to say, but there's a few that he adores. And Martha Holmes was one, Louis Forer was another, and Frank Capra and Bob Capa. And Oh, I forgot.
But
Some of
thank you, Frank. That's a good point, and I hope people also are encouraged by this talk to investigate other photographers of that era, as well as other well-known war photographers of that era. And on that note, I would like to not only thank Tony Vaccaro for his service as a photographer and an artist, but I also want to thank him for his service as a World War II vet. Because, you know, more and more there's fewer World War vets who are with us. And it's just remarkable courage, and thank you, thank you. And also, I do want to, what's the word for it, mention how much joy that Tony expressed on some of the YouTube videos for those little grandchildren, who I'm sure are all fast growing. And thank you to you, Frank. Thank you to Tony's family for, you know, providing this opportunity. And thank you to Sid from Monroe Gallery for sharing today. I've learned so much, and I really, really appreciate this. So
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for coming on. And I know we get people from all over the world. So a wonderful day, wonderful evening, wherever you are. And thank you again, Frank and Maria and your family. And we, of course, all wish your dad, Tony Vaccaro, well. We'll be thinking about him with good wishes there. So, okay.
We'll take him.
Happy birthday, an early happy birthday. Okay. So be well, everybody, and have a nice rest of the day.
Ciao.